Game developers have to think of everything before you do. The thing about that is they can't. There's always going to be something you come up with that they didn't. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 20 things developers didn't think anyone would try, part 2. Starting off with number 20, it's Hitman 2's homing briefcase. For whatever reason, the original version of Hitman 2 had a briefcase with an odd quirk of physics about it. It moved weird, slow, compared to like pretty much every other throwable item in the game. These slow motion physics combined with the way that objects tend to hone in on enemies made for a ridiculous combination. And videos started popping up all over the place demonstrating the briefcase's miraculous abilities.
2 targets remaining.
It's all unintentional, of course, so IO Interactive eventually patched it out. They must not have thought that anyone would try using containers as throwing weapons. Otherwise, they probably would have caught this before release. They did realize how amusing it all was and made a special unlockable briefcase that didn't just have physics like the old briefcase. They actually made it slower. That's the one I'm using right now. It's basically a joke item. It moves so slowly, but yeah, I like jokes.
Show me your hands!
Roger that.
See that?
Okay.
He's a pro.
At number 19, Spider-Man 2's going out of bounds in Antarctica. The newest entry in the Insomniac Spider-Man series is, it's got its fair share of bugs. It's not the disaster a lot of games are shipped as, but nothing out there is perfect. But one of the easiest to replicate bugs, at least at the time of writing this, is one you can break through the invisible barrier during your extremely brief trip to Antarctica. It's so easy to do that it must just have been an oversight by the devs, but at least this one's understandable because seriously, you're in Antarctica for about 10 seconds. Tops. To add a little context, this happens on a mission where you're chasing a black cat through all these portals because she stole this magic object from Doctor Strange. So you're teleporting between all these random locations, and the most spectacular is a moment where you're briefly transported to a glacier. Normally you teleport in, you swing a few times, and you teleport back to New York, but some clever folks noticed it was possible to escape your predefined route by dropping into the water and swimming under the portal. There's a little resistance when you try to start swinging, but with a little perseverance, you can break through and start exploring. Also, you gotta have the game on easy for it to work, otherwise the timer forces you to reset. Exploring this frozen wasteland is pretty weird on its own, but if you keep going and going, you can eventually find New York past the iceberg, just with no collision or anything. It's one of those peek behind the curtains moments in games you love to see. The trick is really specific, but actually pretty easy to pull off. And number 18 is the fall control quit out glitch from Dark Souls. Take any Souls game, this trick will probably work. It's such an easy and ubiquitous trick, I only assume that From doesn't care if you do it. Maybe they don't know, but you'd think at this point somebody would have caught it. Still works in nearly all of their games though. The premise here is you can skip large portions of the game by just falling to the bottom of an area, then quickly quitting the game when you hit the ground. If your timing is right, then instead of the game recording your death and forcing you to restart at the top of whatever cliff, the game is tricked into thinking you're actually still alive at the bottom. It's a common speedrun trick, and in fact there are a lot of variations on it where the player can straight up survive falls that would normally kill him, but those are a little more complicated. This trick is very simple. The real trick to this one is you'll need the spell Fall Control, which slows down your falling speed, makes you take less damage when you fall. You still die instantly from long enough falls, but because of a quirk of the Fall Control spell, you die just a little slower when you hit the ground, so it's a lot easier to get the timing right when you're trying to quit. With Fall Control, the trick is dead simple. You just cast a spell, you fall off the thing, and then you immediately open the menu and be ready to quit the game. Now you just hit the bottom the second you touch the ground, and it'll probably work. Unfortunately, these are still Soul games, so you probably just die from something else in a few seconds, but still a fun trick that people have known about for years, and it still works. And number 17, the flying sword trick from Halo 2. I don't know what it is about the energy sword in Halo 2, but that thing just doesn't want to obey the laws of physics. There are a lot of extremely difficult tricks you can pull off with this thing, but I'm not like a MLG. I'm not doing perfect frame inputs on a whim, so I'm sticking with the easy trick. It's so easy. In fact, it's surprising the devs didn't fix it until after launch. How this particular energy sword trick works is that you get a sword, you climb into the passenger seat of a Warthog. Now you get a friend and have him stand close enough to where you can target him with the sword, swing it once, and let them get far away from you. Then you exit the seat. No matter how far away your buddy is, you'll fly directly to them. Even if they're across the map or in the air flying a Banshee, you will just hone in on them. Like I mentioned above, the trick no longer works in the modern version of the games, which kind of stinks, because the Master Chief Collection actually brought back a lot of the old Halo 2 bugs. Just sadly not this one. So if you have an old copy of the original Halo 2 Xbox disc lying around, it is a cinch to pull off. It's fun too. And number 16 is the frog jump from Days Gone. Pour one out for Bend Studios. Days Gone deserves a lot more respect than it got at release. And more importantly, it has some pretty amazing bugs. Like this one discovered by a guy named No Scope Frog. This trick, it's weirdly specific to pull off, but the basics are that you need to find some specific spots with wonky hitboxes. You crouch and aim your weapon while using focus at the same time. And then it somehow launches you hundreds of feet into the air. Depending on how long you hold down the button, the longer you can go. This trick usually ends in an instant death when you hit the ground, which is funny enough on its own, but it is actually possible to survive with a well-timed roll. I've just never pulled it off. I think it's just fun to see your guy ragdoll. It's one trick that may require a tutorial to fully understand, but once you figure it out, it's pretty easy to replicate. After getting over the initial confusion, I was able to pull this off pretty much 100% of the time. It is one of the more understandable instances of players doing stuff that devs never anticipated, because seriously, who does this? And number 15 is Gears of War's General Ram trick. The final boss of the original Gears of War is infamously annoying to deal with. He's got all these annoying little bugs that swarm you, and his minigun can shred you in a second. Doesn't take much to die during this fight, especially on higher difficulties. Brutal fight, but there's a relatively easy trick that renders the guy completely harmless. All you have to do is quickly rush forward right as the fight starts and hide behind the concrete block on the right. As long as you stay here and never pop out of cover, Ram will just stand around like an idiot and never actually target you. Why? I don't know, but it's a godsend for anybody trying to beat this game on Insane. This thing still works too, even in the remastered version of the game. So either the devs never realized we were breaking their final boss encounter, or left it intentionally in. No other explanations. And number 14 is Jedi Fallen Order's flying trick. It's another one of those glitches, tricks that I'm shocked never got patched out because it's super easy to pull off. Like, I can do this exploit with zero practice, and if I can, anyone can. All you need is the force pull power. You jump in the air, press to pull, then immediately jump again. If you do it right, you'll be able to jump again. Now just keep doing it, and boom, you're essentially flying. That's all it takes to completely break the game. And guess what? Still works. A few other tricks may have been patched out, but not this one. At number 13 is Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom NPC box glitch. I've got to give credit for this one to a commenter named Edward Harvey 8019. I didn't know about this trick before he pointed it out. This is a game with an absurd amount of game-breaking possibilities. A lot of them intentionally part of the game. This isn't one of those things. It's mostly just for a laugh. But the basic idea here is to build a box around an NPC, which makes the physics engine go absolutely nuts. The hard part is getting them inside the box, which means you have to build the floor underneath them. But once you do, and have the walls really close in on them, it's only a matter of time before the box starts completely freaking out, flying in the air and spinning like crazy. Obviously, the NPC collision does not play nice with the buildable physics, and this is the result. In this case, the devs actually did notice this one eventually, so as far as I can tell, it doesn't really work in fully patched versions of the game. But if you're still playing an old version, this trick works great. And number 12 is Quake's Q-Crack controversy. In the last one of these, I talked about an exploit in an EA game, Alice Madness Returns, that allows players to unlock DLC by simply editing the INI file, accessible by anybody. It was hardly the only game that made for a simple unlock in that nature that the game maker probably didn't want people to do. But one of the easiest, best examples happened with the Quake shareware version. If you weren't around at the time, shareware was basically a game demo. It was distributed on a disc or a CD later on. With ID games, you would generally get the first episode, generally for free. Sometimes the shareware cost a little bit of money because they were sold by some unscrupulous third party or whatever. But mostly they were pretty cheap. Most of my information is coming from Quasar, a Doom World moderator. But the gist of what happened was ID released Quake CD, which had the shareware along with Doom. Doom 2, and also Heretic, all on the disc. The copy protection came from the third-party software called Test Drive, but it's very weak, and someone managed to create a key generator called QCrack. It spread like wildfire, and it's how a lot of people played Doom for the first time. It basically allowed anybody who dropped $10 to put this demo CD in to unlock ID's entire game catalog at the time. And no surprise there, the guys from ID were pretty pissed off about it. At the time, though, there was just nothing they could do. The discs were printed. It's a story that's a bit more complicated than simply changing one value in an INI file, but it ended up being far more damaging in the long run. At number 11, Oblivion's paintbrush staircase trick, another classic glitch that, again, somehow still works. In Oblivion, for some reason, the humble paintbrush has no physics applied to it, and it has no falling speed, so when you take it out of your inventory, they just hover in the air. It's weird, but there's one other thing about paintbrushes. You can also stand on them, which means with enough paintbrushes, you can build a floating staircase of brushes that gets basically anywhere in the game. You can use it to climb the Imperial Tower. You can even beat the game early. With paintbrushes, you can go to all kinds of places you're not meant to, and it is tedious, but it's also extremely amusing. Of course, if you're on PC, you can just use TCL and go wherever you want, but if you're on consoles, you have to get creative, and what better tool to be creative with than a paintbrush? And number 10 is the tank flying in Grand Theft Auto 3. A classic trick, not necessarily something devs didn't want you to do, but probably something they just didn't anticipate. I mean, to even get it to work, you got to use some kind of cheat, and I don't think Rockstar doesn't want you flying around in a tank. It's just one of those unexpected things that happens to work. It's a trick that a lot of people used to gain access to later parts of the map early. You summon a tank, start shooting backwards, hit a ramp, and you'll go flying. Throw in the flying cars cheat, and it's even easier. You barely even need to hit a ramp to start flying. Just keep firing that cannon, and the momentum will have you airborne in no time. You can even steer the tank mid-flight. Not very responsive, and sudden moves make it nosedive, but with a light touch, you do have some control over where you're going. And number 9 is the hoverboard race exploit in Ratchet & Clank. This is another one of those exploits that's so easy to do. It had to just be an oversight by the devs. It's too janky to be intentional. You know those hoverboard races at Blackwater? Well, if you come back here with the late game Hollow Disguise tool active, then for some reason when you select to start the race, you get teleported to the racetrack and can walk around freely. It's kind of a cute little boundary break, but there is a reason you would want to do this. When you're racing, the boxes always respawn every lap. How that works is that the game just has them reappear when they're not on screen. That means that if you really wanted to, you could get on the raceway, point Ratchet at some boxes, use a weapon, and as long as the camera isn't pointed at the boxes, they'll infinitely respawn. So you can sit there and get all the bolts you could ever need very easily. And number 8 is Starfield, making a hollow ship. Anytime a game gives you this kind of freedom, the player's going to look for stuff to exploit, you know? That's true of basically every Bethesda game, and that's why we love them. But Starfield in particular has some ridiculous tricks that you can do. What makes this trick work is whenever an enemy ship shoots at you, the target is always center mass. Of course, these ships aren't perfectly accurate or anything, but in general, that's where they're aiming. So some clever players realize you can build your ship in a specific way to get around that. Now, it takes some serious fiddling in the ship creator to get it to work, but it's possible to build a ship that's basically a big empty box. There's a giant hole in the middle of the ship, so if an enemy's firing at you, their shots are just going to whiz by harmlessly. L-shaped ships are even better for this kind of thing. It's not some kind of ultimate no-hit strategy, because missiles will still target you, but it's such an absurd trick that I can't help but love it. I mean, look at that.
Listen up. Yes!
And number 7 is the pause glitch from Mega Man. All-time classic glitch. One of the easiest exploits around. How this works, super simple. You shoot an enemy with a weapon, any weapon, but the thunder beam's probably the best. Then you pause the game. And then you unpause, the enemy will take additional damage. And you just do it again and again and again. And it works because the pause button doesn't stop the invincibility timer on enemies, so as long as your shot is still over the enemy's hitbox, they'll continue taking damage. That's why the thunder beam is so effective. It lasts the longest on screen, so you can maximize the amount of times an enemy takes damage. It's pretty pretty great against pretty much everything, but it's especially effective against the dreaded Yellow Devil boss. If you fought this thing, you know why everyone hates it. It's slow, it's annoying, it's not a fair fight. So even in the scales of the pause glitch, it works, and you end up killing it in seconds. And number 6, the swap cars trick in Fuel. You're in an open world in this game, so you're going to switch to whatever car you want in the open world. You're free to, so why wouldn't you? But when you're in a race, you're supposed to be restricted to a car, the one that you select at the start of the race specifically. Pretty standard rule for this kind of a game, but in this case, there's a really easy way to circumvent it. The trick is to start a race, then open the map screen, then switch over to the car menu. If you press any other buttons and exit on the map screen after opening it the first time, the trick won't work, but if you do it properly, you can freely switch to any vehicle you want in the middle of a race. And it doesn't matter what kind of race it is, all the restrictions are lifted and you can pick whatever the fastest car is for any race type. And that utterly breaks the game. I don't know how it slipped through because it's super easy to do, but whatever, I'm not going to complain about it. And number 5 is Deus Ex, stacking items infinitely. Sick of the limited inventory space in Deus Ex? Well, there's an easy way around that. There's a ton of tricks and exploits in the original game that I could talk about here. This game is full of odd glitches that you can use to your advantage, but this one's so easy and actually useful that it deserves a spot on the list. All you have to do to get this one to work is to fill up your inventory and then move a large item like you're going to drop it, and then press backslash to exit out. Now you've tricked the game into thinking the game is both in your inventory and not in your inventory, so anything you pick up will just appear behind the thing you dropped. That's literally all it takes to have an unlimited amount of inventory space in this game. You gotta love these older games where they just left in totally game-breaking stuff like this. I mean, I never knew it was possible until now, so it's not exactly something everyone is going to stumble onto, but it's pretty easy. And number 4 is Wild Arms, the item dupe / max trick. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came out. Why not talk about an RPG that got buried by the original? This game is great, it's an all-time classic, and it's got an item duplication glitch that's seared into my memory, mostly because of how absurdly easy it is to do. All you have to do is get some healing items, the most basic ones in the game in fact. Now you get the item that you want to duplicate, you make sure you only have one stack of it. From that point, you get into a battle, have your first 2 party members use the healing item, then have your last party member swap the 2 items so the thing you're duplicating takes the place of the healing items in your inventory. That's it. Finish the battle and suddenly you've got 255 of the things you originally had one of. How this works is that by swapping items, the game thinks that the item in that spot is getting used up, so if you only got one of the thing, the game thinks it's been used twice, so that puts it at -1. That causes the integer to roll over, which means the game just gives you the max amount of the item, which is 255. So you can get hundreds of stat boosting items very easily right at the start of the game. It's super easy to do. And number 3 is the illusory wall glitch in Elden Ring. You probably heard about the infamous illusory wall in Volcano Manor that takes over 50 hits to open, right? There was a lot of breathless commentary back when that was discovered about other crazy secrets that be hidden all over the world. But come on, guys, it was clearly a bug. One the developers didn't realistically expect anyone would find, because what kind of lunatic would walk around hitting walls over and over again? Well, the kind of people who play Elden Ring are exactly that kind of lunatic, so this wall was maybe at once a point meant to be a false wall that ended up being breakable by mistake. It seriously takes 52 hits to open it, and when you do it, it just disappears and opens up a location that can be easily accessed. But it's so bizarre that there's a wall that can just be broken, but only after hitting it a couple dozen times. And it got people's attention, let's say. It's another one of those bugs that eventually got fixed, but hell, I managed to get some footage of it. And number 2 is infinitely powerful items in Skyrim. If there's one thing that everybody knows about with Skyrim, it's that enchanting can break the game wide open. The trick here is that you can increase the power of your enchanted equipment exponentially, first by making a bunch of equipment that fortify alchemy, then using the equipment alchemy boost to make a powerful fortify restoration potion. Now remove the equipment, drink the potion, do it all over again, you make your alchemy even stronger. The end goal here is to make it so your equipment boosts alchemy so much that you just completely break the game. With this trick, you can turn basically any random object into the ultimate weapon, killing literally everything with a single hit. It's a tedious and somewhat complicated process, especially if you're not familiar with Skyrim's crafting system, but it's very effective. Just avoid the unofficial Skyrim patch, which for some reason fixes it.
Mind yourself with that fire. Don't burn anything down.
And finally, at number 1, big rigs, over-the-road racing, the reverse speed singularity trick. In this case, things the developers didn't think anyone would try isn't because there's a glitch or exploit here that's difficult to pull off or find. It's anything but. It's just that the game is so bad and broken that the only explanation is they didn't care. Maybe they assumed nobody would play their game. There's nothing here to suggest they ever bothered to playtest it. So, yeah. I'm not sure they even know what a game is supposed to be, or if they care. Big rigs over-the-road racing is infamously terrible. It's ugly. The racer AI doesn't even exist. There's no collision detection on anything. It's not a finished game. But if there's one thing you can do in this game that makes it worth it, it's reverse. There is no top speed limit to reversing in this game, so if you hold that button down, you just keep going faster and faster. There's no collision, so it's incredibly easy to just drive off the map, but at least there's an infinite field that just keeps going in all directions, so you can keep reversing until you're moving at light speed. The sound effect for driving just keeps speeding up while you're doing this. It gets so high-pitched that it escapes the audible spectrum of human hearing. I'm pretty sure it's what entering Nirvana feels like. Or maybe it's just a crappy game. Yeah, it's probably just that it's a crappy game. That's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.